Right then, picture this absolute masterpiece of political theatre. Boris Johnson, the man who left Downing Street in disgrace, career supposedly finished, political credibility in tatters, has just crawled out of whatever comfortable retirement he was enjoying to absolutely eviscerate Sir Keir Starmer over flags. Yes, flags, not the economy, not the NHS, not Brexit or immigration policy in some wonkish policy debate, but the humble St. George's Cross and Union Jack flying from lampposts across Britain. And somehow, in the most Boris way possible, has turned debate about pieces of coloured fabric into a devastating critique of Labour's entire relationship with patriotism, national identity, and working-class Britain. Starmer's trying to walk this impossible tightrope between celebrating flags and condemning their misuse, whilst Johnson standing there with a pair of scissors saying, "Pick a side, mate." This is a story of how Britain's most divisive former Prime Minister just reminded everyone why he won an 80-seat majority, while Starmer's approval ratings circle a drain. And honestly, whether you love Boris or loathe him, you've got to admire the sheer audacity of the man. Quick favour. If you're absolutely living for this kind of political drama and want British Mirror to keep bringing you the spiciest takes on Westminster's chaos, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell. Over 94% of you watching haven't subscribed yet. It's free, takes 2 seconds, and genuinely helps us loads. Cheers if you did. Right, back to Boris versus Starmer in the Battle of the Bunting. Let's start with what actually kicked this whole spectacular row off, shall we? Over the summer, people across England started putting up flags in public spaces, hanging them from street lamps, signposts, basically anywhere they could attach a bit of fabric. St. George's crosses and Union Jacks suddenly appeared everywhere, turning ordinary streets into something resembling permanent World Cup celebrations. Now, for some people, this was brilliant. A spontaneous outbreak of patriotic pride, communities celebrating their national identity without needing permission from anyone. For others, and this is where it gets properly contentious, these flags represented something far more sinister, fear-mongering tools of the far right, symbols being weaponized to stir up anti-immigration sentiment and racial tensions. Boris Johnson, never one to miss an opportunity for a bit of culture war mischief, took to Twitter and the Daily Mail to absolutely lay into Starmer's response to all this flag-waving. He wrote about his appreciation for these impromptu displays of national feeling, saying he has nothing against people putting up flags. In fact, he went further, claiming they give the winter months a festive, almost jubilee mood. He even told his children that the flags are just a way of saying hooray for England, hooray for Britain, which is peak Boris, reducing complex political symbolism to something a toddler would understand, and somehow making it work rhetorically. But here's where Johnson really stuck the knife in and gave it a proper twist. He claimed that people are putting up English and British flags because Keir Starmer's Labour Party simply doesn't share their patriotism. That's not a policy disagreement. That's questioning the fundamental relationship between the government and the people it's supposed to represent. He's essentially arguing that ordinary Britons have taken to hanging flags from lampposts because they can't trust their own government to celebrate the country without caveats, conditions, and lengthy disclaimers about inclusivity and diversity. Now let's look at how Starmer actually responded to this flag situation, because this is where you can see him trying to have his cake and eat it too, and ending up with crumbs all over his face. Speaking to The Guardian back in September, Starmer said that the St. George's flag represents our diverse country, which is already a slightly odd framing. The St. George's Cross is specifically England's flag, representing English identity. And whilst modern England is certainly diverse, the phrasing feels like it's already trying to soften or apologize for the flag's existence. He also stated he would not tolerate people being intimidated on our streets because of their background or the color of their skin, which, fair enough, nobody wants that. But immediately linking flag flying to potential intimidation creates an association in people's minds. Starmer told BBC Radio 5 Live that he's very encouraging of flags, thinks they are patriotic and a great symbol of a nation, and doesn't think they should be devalued or belittled. So far, so good. Sound quite positive, actually. But then comes a massive caveat that undermines everything he just said. I think sometimes when they're used purely for divisive purposes, actually it devalues a flag. And there it is. The classic politician's trick of saying you support something while simultaneously suggesting it's often used improperly. It's like saying, I love dogs, but sometimes they bite children, so we need to be careful about dogs. You just poison the entire concept you claim to support. The fundamental problem with Starmer's position, and this is what Johnson's absolutely skewering him for, is that it reeks of metropolitan liberal unease with uncomplicated patriotism. Working-class communities have been flying flags for generations without needing to issue mission statements about diversity and inclusion. They put up a St. George's cross because they are English and proud of it. End of story. But Starmer can't just say, brilliant, love it, more flags please, because he's terrified that someone somewhere might be flying a flag for the wrong reasons, with the wrong attitudes, attracting the wrong kind of attention. So instead, he ends up with this tortured position that manages to simultaneously claim to love flags whilst implying that flag wavers need to be monitored for improper motivation. Johnson, demonstrating the political instinct that won him the mayoralty of London twice and then a landslide general election victory, has identified this weakness and driven a double-decker bus straight through it. By positioning himself as a champion of straightforward, no caveats patriotism against Starmer's qualified, conditional flag appreciation, he set up a culture war battle that Labour simply cannot win. Because here's the thing, most ordinary people don't think flying your country's flag requires elaborate justification or careful consideration of context. They just think it's normal, and politicians tying themselves in not trying to explain when flag flying is acceptable and when it's problematic come across as deeply weird and out of touch. But Johnson wasn't finished with just a flag controversy. Oh no. He expanded his attack to include Labour's decision to cancel the previous Conservative government's Rwanda asylum scheme. Now, the Rwanda plan was always controversial, involving sending asylum seekers to Rwanda for processing at an eye-watering cost of £200,000 per person, according to the Migration Observatory. Whether it would have worked is debatable. Whether it was good value for money is highly questionable. But Johnson's not interested in those details. He's interested in the symbolism. Asked if things had turned a corner in 2026, Preston is unequivocal. Not at all. I think optimism is an astonishingly low level. People feel very negative, very pessimistic. They feel hostile, frustrated, and angry everywhere, and it's going to take a long time to fix that. This is about public psychology, not just economics. Even if objective conditions improve, people's subjective feelings of pessimism, frustration, and anger are deeply entrenched and won't shift quickly. And those feelings are what drive voting behavior and political outcomes. Preston continues, and when things do get better economically, it takes time for people to feel that in their pockets and feel that psychologically optimism is hard to instill. So whoever's in power, whoever's in has got a very tough job on their hands, and Keir Starmer is not the right man. That last sentence is a killer. Even if the job is incredibly difficult, even if anyone would struggle, Starmer specifically is not the right man for it. Someone else might succeed or at least have a chance. Starmer doesn't. Preston's formal prediction is emphatic. My prediction is Keir Starmer goes, absolutely. I thought he would be gone by the end of 2025. And I have to confess, I did put a small £10 bet on that, which hasn't worked. I've now officially lost 10 quid. The fact that he actually bet money on Starmer being gone by end of 2025 shows this isn't just punditry. Preston was confident enough to wager on it. He was wrong on timing, but maintains his right on the ultimate outcome. I think most people feel that he will be gone. Most people don't think it's certain. I think it's almost certain he has to go. The football manager analogy Preston uses is perfect and devastating. Labour cannot improve. It's like a football manager when the club is at the bottom of the league. 3/4 of the season have gone, and your only chance now is to change leadership. You swap managers. This captures the logic of leadership change when recovery under current management seems impossible. You're not necessarily sacking the manager because they are bad. You're sacking them because the situation is beyond salvaging under their leadership, and only change offers hope. When Dawn Neeson asks who would replace Starmer, Preston immediately names Andy Burnham as the popular choice at the moment. Burnham is currently mayor of Greater Manchester and doesn't have a parliamentary seat, but Preston dismisses that as a minor obstacle. He doesn't have a seat, but that's easily doable. I think Clive Lewis came forward and offered his seat, which he really shouldn't have done, that undermined Keir Starmer in early December. I think there would be plenty of people that would step forward and do that knowing they'd be compensated down the line by the Labour leader. This is where the prediction gets really interesting because it outlines a specific mechanism. Burnham becomes Labour leader. Some Labour MP, probably in a safe seat, agrees to stand down and trigger by-election. Burnham stands in that by-election, wins easily because of the safe Labour seat, enters Parliament, and becomes Prime Minister. The MP who stood aside gets compensated with a peerage or some other position. It's been done before in British politics and could easily be done again if Labour decides Burnham is their salvation. Preston's analysis of Reform UK and Nigel Farage is also insightful. He notes Reform is polling around 28% on average, and even if they drop to 25%, they should be very comfortable because that's still historically high for a party of their type. But he identifies a psychological danger. The problem is, it's at momentum, isn't it? If it were to carry on, and when you fall, like with football, when you have a bad run, people start fighting, infighting, causing trouble behind the scenes, and that's a very difficult job for a manager to handle. Preston raises a question about Farage's leadership. And the question is, if they dip down to 22% and there's infighting, is Nigel Farage the right man to manage that? This parallels his Starmer critique. It's not enough to be good when things are going well. Leadership is about handling adversity, managing declining momentum, preventing infighting. Can Farage do that? Preston seems uncertain. The broader context for all of this is Labour's catastrophic polling. They are being hammered across almost every metric. Approval ratings are terrible. Economic confidence is low. Trust in government is cratering. The contrast between pre-election promises and post-election reality is stark. Voters feel deceived, disappointed, and angry. That's the environment in which Starmer is trying to project optimism and hope, and it's simply not working because he doesn't have the personal charisma or political capital to overcome it. Preston's sympathy for Starmer actually makes a critique more powerful. He is not gleefully predicting the PM's demise out of partisan hatred. He genuinely feels sorry for Starmer's impossible situation, while still concluding that he's doomed. That's more devastating than pure partisan attack because it suggests even sympathetic observers see no path forward for Starmer.